continue to learn from it. The way I was taught economics is, this isn't the truth, this is the benchmark. This is a benchmark against which we're going to judge reality. This model holds almost exactly never. Right? There are some markets for which this is actually quite a good model. There are numerous others for which it is a reasonable approximation if you're just doing back-of-the-envelope policy analysis, but it is not the exact correct model almost ever. There's always some way in which it's off. That's the nature of a model. Right? If you make a model of, say, a car or an airplane, it better not be exactly like the car or the airplane, or it isn't the model. You just built a tiny little car. So these are the questions we want to ask, same as with the standard approach. Qualitatively, how will markets fail to maximize social welfare? Quantitatively, how big will the failure be? And then, exactly what could, not should, public policy do to solve the problem? Now, why do I have exactly in parentheses here? One of the things that I have tried to point out repeatedly is that when we relax the assumption of rationality, we lose willingness to pay as a reliable measure of people's value for things. Sometimes, if people have enough sophistication, we can say that under some conditions, a person's willingness to pay is still right. So in the problem set, if you've managed to make progress on problem 2, you have willingness to pay D, which is the willingness to pay for a second dose of Bupa right before you get it. Right? It's right there in front of you. You're in the satiated state already, so there's no projection bias. It's today, so there's no quasi-hyperbolic discounting. And it's just going to be given right to you. And so we want to say that willingness to pay, we're going to trust. We believe that's a valid measure of the actual value to that person, as long as they're familiar, aware of the health consequences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But all the other measures of willingness to pay, which a standard economist might be tempted to take literally, right? Let's just go ask at any time. This is what people do with environmental economics. Let's just go ask people how they feel about, preserving wetlands. We don't care when we ask them, or whether they're hungry or not, or whether whether they've just gotten back from a trip to the woods, right? Or whether they just had a fight with their spouse. We don't care about that. We just ask them their willingness to pay, and that's that. Right? So already we have a problem, because when there are violations of rationality, we don't necessarily get to assume that your stated or even behaviorally revealed willingness to pay is actually a valid measure of your utility. Okay? So it's going to be tricky to get real precise with qualitative questions, or quantitative questions, or figure out quantitatively exactly what should public policy do. And that's going to be one of the big challenges. The other big challenge is closely, well, it's not so closely related. Everything's related, but the other big challenge is that depending on people's level of sophistication about their irrationality, right? So for example, with beta delta, we've got naives and sophisticates. They have the same preferences. So their willingness to pay, in some cases, will be wrong in exactly the same way relative to their own actual utility, their own actual preferences, but the sophisticate will know about it and the naive won't. Okay? So to say to the naive, look, we've got this public policy that's going to make you better off by fixing your irrationality, may not be very compelling to the naive. Right? It might be very compelling to the sophisticate. When I first got a computer, right, almost all Windows computers come with a toxic social virus called Minesweeper. Right? And I got completely addicted to Minesweeper. I'd be doing my job, and in the middle of the day, I'd say, I'm just going to spend 5 minutes playing Minesweeper. And you can play, a game of Minesweeper lasts about, once you get the trick, it lasts about 30 to 45 seconds, right? I would play Minesweeper for 2 hours, And I was just dying for somebody to come. I was just like, please come over and hit my computer with a bat. Or me, for that matter. But there was no one there to help. I would have paid top dollar for a public policy that made it possible for me to stop playing Minesweeper after 10 minutes. I have my co-author Vinci Chan. I have since created that device, and it's not particularly complicated, and I'm going to talk about it on Thursday. But that's because I'm sophisticated about my self-control problem, right? And if I wasn't, then I might, and you came along and said, oh, I'm going to cut you off after 10 minutes, trust me, it's for your own good, I might say, no, you're public enemy number 1, I'm going to go vote for somebody else. Okay, so here's my ideological statement. And again, I've told you my ideology is basically the ideology of no ideology, which is the truth, the right answer is always in the details. So just as it would be unreasonable, and is widely considered by all economists to be unreasonable, to accept the conclusions of the perfectly competitive market model in the presence of an externality or a monopoly, it is just as unreasonable, and for exactly the same reasons, to accept the conclusions of the model, ta-da, when the assumption of rationality is violated. Right? That would be like saying, the average height of an American male is 5'9". This person is from Iran. What is the average height what is their most likely height? 5'9". Wait. The assumption of your model was that the individual is from the United States. This one is from Iran. You're done. Go home. You've just made a false statement. Okay. So let me just walk through an example that I've already showed you, so you can see that this is already what we're doing. And I want to really want to map what we're doing in this class exactly into the framework and the parlance and even the diagrams that you're so familiar with from Econ 1 100A. Okay. So here's this thing I call shiny object bias. This is loss aversion, which is already stacked on top of reference dependent preferences. So it's loss aversion with reference point adaptation and projection bias. Right? So we're stepping away from the standard model by 3 degrees. We're taking 3 big steps away from the assumptions of the rational model. Okay? I mean, you could say that loss aversion with reference point adaptation is really just 1 step, but it's either 1 or it's 3 or it's 2, but it's steps. We're taking several steps away. Okay? And the market failure in this market, let's say this is the market for iPhones that we looked at last time. The market failure is conceptually very, very similar to gasoline externality. What's going on here? So this D-proj, right, which is the demand curve, the willingness to pay of a person who has this projection bias problem, that's what you actually observe. That's dollars on the countertop, right? So that is the observed demand curve. Over here, I called it private marginal benefit. I'm not willing to do that anymore. Right? Here, this D-rat, or the rational demand curve, we're sort of saying, if we believe our model, that's sort of the dollar value of the true utility that the individual gets according to their own preferences. Right? So next period, when their reference point is adjusted, this is how they're actually going to feel about the iPhone. Okay? So that is, I'm going to call that actual social marginal benefit. The tricky thing is that it's not the difference between the demand curve, the observed demand curve, and social marginal benefit isn't the difference between private benefit and external benefit. It's the difference between the person's perceived benefit at the time of purchase and the actual benefit that they get later on when they actually own the iPhone. Okay, so this is conceptually a little bit different, but the model works out exactly the same way. If this is the observed demand curve here, and the place where it intersects with the supply curve is going to be, we called it Q-proj, but we could just as easily call that Q-market. Okay, and the place where we think, quote unquote, the person should be, right, where their true utility would be maximized, we can just think of that as Q-opt. And so, right, the basic problem is the same. There's overproduction because there's a sort sort of in some sense a cost that's not being taken into consideration, or a sort of phantom benefit that shouldn't be taken into consideration. We can say what that is. It's the difference between these two lines, right? That is the cost of projection bias. So that's equivalent to the marginal cost of the externality in the gasoline market. And we can identify for the units that shouldn't have been produced and consumed, this is how much they cost society, this is how much they actually benefited the consumer, and so we could say that's dead weight loss. And it's exactly the same diagram. Okay? It's going to get tricky when we try to figure out what the actual number is, right? Because this is tough to measure. The cost of projection bias, we're not so sure we know how to measure that. Okay? But that should not discourage us from making the attempt. When people first looked at this diagram, my hunch is that many of them said, you are never going to be able to measure this. We're talking about birds and fish. They don't spend dollars. You're done. Go home. But we did not get discouraged, and we now have ways that we try to measure that we think are more or less believable. Okay? So this thing here, this cost of projection bias, this is what some behavioral economists and non-behavioral economists are starting to call an internality. I try to always put this in quotes. It's not a great word, because what we mean when we say externality is that there's a cost that's external to the market, and the solution is to internalize it. This is something that is internal to the market participants, but it's not internalized in their willingness to pay. So it's, for me, I'd rather call it something other than internality, and I don't know what word to use yet, so I'm just going to keep calling it internality. It's a market failure. People are failing to take fully into account their own actual preferences. They are not rationally maximizing their utility, so their revealed willingness to pay, as measured by the height of their demand curve, cannot be accepted as a valid representation of their true utility, okay, the true benefit to society of consumption. Okay, so as I've already sort of stated, and I want to reiterate as often as I can, there's two basic problems. How do we measure this? Precisely because we've allowed ourselves to relax the assumption of rationality, we basically have left our ruler right behind. Willingness to pay is our ruler, and we checked it at the door, because as soon as you start relaxing rationality, you can still observe willingness to pay, but you don't get to call it a measure of utility. So we put our ruler down. It's hard to measure things. The second challenge is going to be, if we fix this, if we find a way to measure it and we fix it, will consumers thank us? Do consumers perceive this as a failure? Okay. Now, if you allow shiny object bias to drive you into large amounts of consumer debt, raise your hand if you've ever done that. I have. It was terrible. Let me just suggest it's a really, really, really bad idea to go into debt to the IRS. Anyway, that's a story for another time. If you allow shiny object bias to drive you into large amounts of personal debt and potentially wind up having to go bankrupt, you may very well start to really have some sophistication about this problem and say, you know what, I can't keep myself from getting carried away by the desire to purchase a new thing and the belief that it's going to make me happy for the rest of my life. I would really love it if someone could come along and impose some kind of constraint on me. But you might very well not see that. And if you haven't driven yourself that far into credit card debt yet or in debt to the IRS, then if you're self-employed, here's the way this happens. If you're employed by somebody else, you can't go in debt to the IRS because they take the money straight off the top of your but if you're self-employed, which I was for about 8 years, you pay your withholding on your own recognizance. And if you're going into a debt on your credit card, when it comes time to pay your taxes, you say, penalty the IRS will charge me if I don't pay this between now and April 15th is 8%. Penalty that my bank will charge me if I don't pay it to them now is 19, 25, whatever it is. Maybe it's not, it's bigger than 8. I will take this money that I should be sending to the IRS for my withholding. I will give it to my credit card. Come April 15th, somehow, mysteriously, you haven't come up with the money. So you don't send anything to the IRS, and now you're in deep water. Don't let this happen to you. Okay. So depending on what consumers perceive or what their level of sophistication is, they may or may not actually value public policy designed to help them to maximize what we can arguably in some cases demonstrate should be their utility or is actually their utility. Okay? So we may find ourselves, even though we're doing our best to focus on what is good for people according to their own preferences, we may find ourselves liable to charges of paternalism. And I think it's a big gray area as to whether or not the kinds of public policies that we could come up with actually are paternalism. And I think this is one of the big gray areas that you find yourself wallowing around in when you relax the assumption of rationality. So to give you an example, if we follow the externality logic, right, we could solve this problem by just placing a tax on iPhones exactly equal to the cost of projection bias, and we'd be done. And my guess is that most consumers of iPhones would say, this is a free country, get off my neck. And I think I would probably agree with them. Okay. So we've seen a number of other examples of this, other internalities that we've seen that we could model if we wanted to similarly. And if you were taking a class from me in cost-benefit analysis, you would do exactly this. So self-control problems result in too much demand for temptation goods and too little demand for investment goods. Anticipatory utility, we've seen how that can result in too little demand for health testing and various other forms of useful information. Projection bias, when there's habit formation, can result in too little demand for goods that have a positive habit formation effect, like exercise and going to the gym, and too much demand for goods with a negative habit formation effect, like tea. This is a little bit more obscure, but we've seen how loss aversion combined with narrow bracketing can result in too little supply of labor, right, on high-wage days. Person has an income target, and they narrowly bracket their income on a daily basis, then they can wind up supplying too little, even according to what we could arguably say should be their preferences. Their preferences ought to be defined over a month's worth of income. They should be working more in some, I think, pretty realistic way. I think it's not terribly unreasonable to say that income targeting with daily narrow bracketing is a mistake, but people do it anyway. And then we've seen with the equity premium puzzle that if people are constantly checking their portfolio and feeling gain-loss utility every time their stocks go up and down, even though they're not cashing those stocks out and spending the money, they just get this pain of loss aversion every time they see their stocks go down, then they may wind up supplying too little capital to stocks versus bonds, which may or may not mean too little overall, but the wrong distribution for society. Okay? We've seen some others. We'll see plenty more to come. And I want to make the general claim that analyzing these market failures is no different from analyzing classical market failures, except for the things I've already said. Right? It's hard to know how much people value things when you've let go of willingness to pay, and then it's also hard to know whether or not people will thank you for the policy, whether or not your policy will be considered paternalism. Okay. Oh. Okay. Okay. I see. I stopped doing animations about here, so I apologize for that. Don't know why that happened. So let's look at an example. There's a paper on this. I haven't posted the readings yet, but I will. The optimal syntax is a paper. I can't remember who it's by. I think it's. I want to say it's Botan Kosegi and Jonathan Gruber, but I'm not actually sure. But we're going to think about this. Consider a smoker. Now, we're not going to think about smoking, the addiction component. We're only going to think about the fact that there's a delayed health benefit and that somebody might have present bias preferences and therefore ignore that benefit. So we're going to wave our hands at a big chunk of stuff here, which is the whole question of smoking actually being addictive and whether people might have rejection bias. We're just going to wave our hands at that. So here's a smoker, here's a utility. Every time they smoke, they get a delayed health cost of C, okay, that happens somewhere down the road, so they're going to discount it. And they get an immediate reward of B, because at least certainly when you're addicted to cigarettes, it feels darn good to smoke them. But B, we're going to allow B to vary, maybe with some degree of randomness. Sometimes it's really high, sometimes it's really low, depending on things like your mood, okay? If you're really stressed out, you just had a fight, go for that cigarette. And then we're going to let them have present bias preferences with beta less than 1, okay? So first, let's try to think about what's optimal. Now, it's a little hard to say. Who should we ask? Which of this person's selves should we ask? But typically what we do as behavioral economists is to say, well, let's ask them in the absence of any discounting at all. Or if we're allowing some delta less than 1, which I'm ignoring here, let's just take away beta and ask them how they would feel about this if the only discounting they did was the rational discounting of delta. This person's long-term, non-discounted utility is maximized by smoking whenever B is greater than C, right? Marginal benefit greater than marginal cost, do it. That should be your basic decision rule for life, okay? Some cigarettes really are worth the health cost, okay? The correct amount of risky behavior to engage in is never 0, right? If you never did anything that had even the slightest risk of death, you would never get out of bed in the morning. The fact of the matter is that the simple act of being born is attended by 100% risk of death. So there may be people for whom the correct number of cigarettes to smoke really is not 0. Present biased utility, the immediate I'm about to smoke version of the utility function, is maximized by smoking whenever B is greater than beta times C, which is smaller than C, right? So now there's a larger set of cigarettes that I will smoke. And if beta, when you're addicted to something and you're kind of craving it, I think it's not unreasonable to think that there are conditions under which beta slides down awfully close to 0. But that's, now I'm talking out of school because we don't have a model for beta changing. What this means is that whenever the benefit of smoking a cigarette is in between the true cost and the discounted cost, the smoker is causing themselves a net loss. And depending upon their level of naivete or sophistication, they may be more or less aware of this. I think most smokers, by the time they've entered into sort of the latter stages of psychological development, beyond about 23, start to feel like they're making a mistake. Okay. The portion of the future cost that the smoker ignores is 1 minus beta times C. Okay, so to see that, right, the true harm is C. The harm that they take into account is beta times C, which means that they ignore C minus beta times C, which is equal to 1 minus beta times C. Okay? So I'm going to call that the size of the internality. Right? This is the sort of the size of the irrationality in some sense. And hopefully you can already see how, hey, look, these things are variables. Variables can be replaced with actual numbers. We might conceivably be on our way to actually quantifying this market failure. Conceivably. Notice that it does not matter if the smoker is naive or sophisticated. Okay? This is a situation. Now, we've seen other situations where if you're sophisticated, you may be able to sort of minimize the damage, right? By getting that problem set out of the way in the first period instead of procrastinating at all, or by buying a gym contract that reduces your marginal cost of going to the gym on days when you really don't want to. But with smoking, I mean, unless you pay Luigi to come and break your kneecaps if you smoke, I don't know what, I heard this thing on NPR where some woman, her friend said, are you still smoking? She said, I tell you what, if I smoke again, this is my last cigarette, if I smoke again, I'm going to give $5,000 to the Ku Klux Klan, which was something that she found so deeply aversive, and she actually believed that her friend would somehow hold her to this, right? She's like, and it kept her from smoking. So that was like hiring Luigi, right? In the NPR interview, these two women were then sort of like 30 years down the road, and her friend said, there's no way I was going to hold you to that. But the point is that by and large, sophistication does not actually allow a smoker to do anything about the problem. Okay? There's no way, they can't get all the smoking done early, or enter into some kind of commitment contract that only smoke the ones they really want. There's nothing they can do about it. So it doesn't matter if they're naive or sophisticated. The outcome is the same. The only thing that varies is what degree of awareness they have about it. Okay. So we know what to do when people are doing too much of something harmful. Tax them, right? If people are producing too much CO2, tax them for it. If people are breaking into other people's houses too much, tax them for it, right? Tax them by putting them in prison. It's the same concept over and over again in public policy. If the internality is the amount of the future cost that the smoker ignores, then what we've learned about externalities would suggest that the optimal T, tax rate, would be just big enough to prevent them from ignoring it. In other words, to set the tax equal to the size of the internality. Right? That's like setting the tax equal to the size of the marginal cost of externality in the case of pollution. So let's just see if that intuition is right. What would actually happen to the person's decision rule if we impose a tax of 1 minus beta times C? The decision rule would become smoke if the immediate benefit, net benefit is greater than the discounted future cost. So smoke if B minus the tax, right, you're going to pay that right away, is greater than or equal to the perceived discounted future cost. Well, that's the same thing as saying, now we'll just plug in for T, that's B minus 1 minus beta times C greater than beta times C, which is the same thing as saying B minus C plus beta C greater than beta C. And that's the same thing as saying B greater than C. Aha, the rational decision rule. So this tax perfectly corrects the person's decision rule, just as taxing an externality by the